One day, Matt Stetar was everywhere. Grease on his hands, a spark in his eyes, and the sound of an ancient diesel engine roaring back to life behind him. He was the heartbeat of Diesel Creek, the guy who could turn rusted scrap into a working legend. But then, he vanished. No farewell, no warning, just a silence that left fans digging for answers. And what they found was stranger, darker, and more twisted than anyone expected. Matt didn't just fix machines, he resurrected them. Diesel Creek wasn't some polished TV show with perfect lighting and scripted banter. It was raw, real. You could almost smell the oil through the screen. Fans didn't just watch for the restorations. They watched for Matt, the way he'd glance at the camera mid-project, as if letting you in on a secret. The way his laugh cut through the grind of metal, reminding you this was more than work. It was love. The channel exploded. One video about an abandoned bulldozer buried in weeds hit millions of views, pulling in new subscribers every hour. Matt became a kind of folk hero for gearheads and dreamers alike. Proof that forgotten things still had a place in the world. But behind that sudden fame was a cost. The hours stretched longer, the stakes got higher, and every project seemed bigger than the last. Friends said Matt barely saw daylight that wasn't filtered through a garage door. Projects stacked up, deadlines closed in, and the YouTube algorithm never slept. Still, he pushed forward, smiling for the camera, even when his hands were bleeding from a slipped wrench. What the audience couldn't see was the exhaustion settling in behind his eyes, the quiet sighs between takes, the pressure to outdo himself with every upload. Passion can be a double-edged blade, and for Matt, the sharper it got, the closer it came to cutting into the man behind the legend. At first, it was subtle, the kind of thing only his most devoted fans would notice. A missed upload here, a project that ended abruptly there. Videos got shorter, edits tighter, and Matt started spending more time behind the camera instead of in front of it. For a guy who had built his brand on being hands-on, it felt off. Comment sections began to hum with quiet speculation. Is Matt okay? Looks like he's tired. Something's different. The theories multiplied. Maybe he was focusing on bigger projects behind the scenes, or maybe he was finally taking a break. But the tone in those comments hinted at something more. A growing unease that fans couldn't quite put into words. Close friends noticed changes too. He wasn't hanging around after filming to talk like he used to. His laugh came less easily, and his once boundless energy seemed rationed, like he was trying to conserve it. On camera, the smile was still there, but off camera, it was fading. The man who could coax life out of rusted engines was starting to seem like one himself. Worn, quiet, and in need of repair. And that shift was only the beginning. When the upload slowed to a trickle, the internet filled in the gaps the way it always does, with whispers, half-truths, and wild theories. On Reddit threads, people claimed they'd heard from a friend of a friend that Matt had stepped away after a personal crisis. TikTok creators dropped cryptic videos, hinting at a heartbreaking tragedy without ever saying what it was. Some fans swore they saw him working quietly in the background of other projects, while others insisted he'd disappeared completely. One rumor suggested a falling out between Matt and other members of the Diesel Creek crew. Nothing confirmed, just speculation based on the lack of shared screen time. Others pointed to strange comments under older videos, now deleted, that hinted at trouble long before anyone noticed. Every scrap of information, real or imagined, got passed around like contraband. The mystery only deepened when Matt himself stayed silent, never addressing the speculation directly. And that silence worked like fuel on the fire. Without a statement, every vague hint became a clue. Every absence a sign of something bigger. It didn't matter whether the rumors were true. The unanswered questions were more powerful than any answer could be. But things took an even stranger turn when a name from outside the Diesel Creek story got pulled into the chaos. The online frenzy reached a boiling point when a TikTok clip surfaced claiming that someone known as 19 Diesel, also called Chris, had tragically passed away. Almost instantly, the rumor mill twisted the story, and many began to conflate 19 Diesel with Matt Stetar. The usernames, the Diesel connection, the machinery background. For casual followers, it seemed like more than coincidence. Within hours, comment sections filled with condolences for Matt, some even posting edited memorial clips using footage from his older videos. Others pushed back, pointing out that there was no concrete link between Matt and this other figure. But the damage was done. The lines between fact and fiction had blurred. What made it worse was Matt's silence. No posts, no videos, no comments to clarify the truth. For fans desperate for answers, that lack of denial felt like confirmation. The confusion took on a life of its own, spawning conspiracy-laden threads and emotional tributes that assumed the worst. The story of Matt Stetar had just collided with that someone else's tragedy, and untangling the two would prove almost impossible. And for those following closely, the next phase of the mystery wasn't about rumors. It was about what life might have looked like for Matt far away from the public eye. Away from the lights and the lens, Matt's world was a mystery. And maybe that was the point. For years, he had let millions into his workshop, his projects, and, in small ways, his personality. But what happened when the camera switched off? Friends hinted at long days that bled into nights, where the only soundtrack was the steady clink of tools and the hum of a space heater in a cold garage. Some believed he had simply burned out, the relentless pace of content creation grinding him down until the joy of building became another deadline to meet. Others whispered about personal losses that had nothing to do with YouTube, but weighed heavier than any mechanical problem. It's easy to forget that for Matt, Diesel Creek wasn't just a channel. It was a bum, a responsibility, and a brand. Every decision carried the pressure of keeping fans engaged and the algorithm fed. Off camera, that pressure didn't disappear. It followed him into every corner of his life, turning passion into something more complicated. Like an old machine that still runs but isn't quite tuned right, Matt might have been moving forward, but not without strain. And that strain was about to show itself in the most silent way possible. It didn't happen overnight. There was no dramatic farewell video, no tearful announcement. Instead, Matt seemed to simply fade. Uploads grew sporadic, and when they did appear, his presence in them felt smaller, as though he were a guest on his own channel. Viewers noticed the shift. The grease-stained hands were still there, but the energy was different, like he was running on fumes. Weeks without updates turned into months. Social media went cold. The familiar workshop, once loud with the clang of tools and Matt's voice explaining every move, now stood silent in the minds of fans. The absence became louder than any video he could have made. And in that silence, the community's imagination filled every gap. Was he quietly working on a massive comeback project? Had something happened that made it impossible to film? Or was this simply the end of the road for Matt Stetar on Diesel Creek? What made it so haunting was the lack of closure. In the world of YouTube, most creators either burn out publicly or fade quietly. But Matt's exit felt intentional, like a chapter ripped from a book mid-sentence. And that missing ending is what kept the mystery alive. After all the speculation, the rumors, and the silence, the truth about Matt Stetar's disappearance from Diesel Creek remains tangled between fact and fiction. What we know for certain is this. Matt was once the face of one of YouTube's most beloved restoration channels. His skill, personality, and dedication built a community that stretched far beyond the workshop walls. And then, without a clear reason, he stepped back. What we don't know is why. Was it burnout, a personal loss, a behind-the-scenes conflict that could never be patched up, or something far more private, the kind of truth that doesn't belong to the public? The internet thrives on filling in blanks, and Matt's story is now a blank page covered in scribbled guesses. Every theory says more about the people telling it than it does about Matt himself. In the end, maybe the real answer is one we'll never get, and maybe that's how he wants it. After all, a man who can bring the dead back to life might also know when to let something rest in peace. And so the question remains, echoing through the Diesel Creek fandom, was this truly the end, or just the quiet beginning of something we're not supposed to see yet? If you've made it this far, you're clearly as hooked on these untold stories as we are. So hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story might just change the way you see your favorite creators forever.